Good afternoon, 10th grade. This message is to explain 3 different points that I would like to explain to you guys. 1 or 2 might be able to help you answer some of the questions, but it's more in regards to a reflection on the assignments that I've been receiving. Okay. The first one is one that we had the video chat this morning, and we were talking about the question regarding the relationship between freedom and power. So I wanted to talk first about that. We want to, whenever we have this question, it's very important to define the question, to define the terms that we're using within the question. So the first part is what is power? Second part is what is freedom? Because we're asking what is the relationship between power and freedom. So we need to define what power is, what freedom is. Now, if we're going to define power, power is more of a straightforward concept. Power is what you would consider the amount of control that you have over your subjects, or over people, over employees, that kind of dynamic, right? So administration has power over their employees. Even to a small extent, we can say that parents have power over their children, teachers have power over their students, bosses have power over their employees as well, similar to the administration comment I just made. But in a broader sense, and if you're thinking of it in a much larger scale, you want to think of a government. A government has power over its citizens, over its constituency. So it has the ability to control the things that the constituents can and cannot do, more so over what they cannot do. This is the case with the United States. The United States is based on a structure where the government is tasked to find out what things citizens, people, should not do, and not worry about what they can do, right? So for instance, we have the ability to do what we would like, but we cannot infringe on someone else's rights. So murder, theft, these things are prohibited because they take away freedom of other people. If you murder someone, obviously you're taking their life. If you rob someone of their property, then you're taking something from them, typically something that they've worked hard to achieve or to obtain. So we want to make sure that that power dynamic is to restrict limitations, right? Which leads to the second term, freedom. A lot of times freedom can be defined, which is not necessarily the perfect definition of the term. But freedom, the concept and the perspective in which we want to view freedom is the lack of restriction. Right? We don't want to say that it's our ability to do whatever we want, because we don't want to necessarily view it that way, because then we're saying, okay, well, if I want to do something bad, why don't I have the liberty to do it? Well, because you're taking away someone else's rights, and that is not your freedom. But the more restrictions that are placed on you in a society as a people, the less freedom you are considered to have. So these are the things in which we want to focus on, right? Freedom is the ability to have less restrictions on our ability to live our lives and do the things that we would like to do, but it's not defined as doing what we want. It's defined as not being restricted in the things that I would like to do. So try to think of that dynamic shift where you're not viewing it from a personal perspective where this is what I would like to do, but in the fact that these are the limitations that I have in my life to do the things that I would like. It's just viewing it from a different perspective. So given that in mind, and obviously since we live in the United States, it is the best way to frame our understanding of this dynamic, because it's one that we're familiar with. In the United States, the government has power and the people have freedom. So what is a relationship that they have that the text is asking you about? basically what it's wanting you to understand is that power is something that the government has over the people, but freedom is what we as citizens have rights to. So where does that relationship lie if you're going to consider, okay, well, if we're going to give the citizen the government power over us, when is that power too much, where we feel that our freedom isn't valued and we need to revolt in response to the restrictions of those freedoms? Or when is the government too lenient, give us too much freedom, and therefore strip themselves of the power that they should have in order to control their citizens? Because if you remember, going back to the definition of power, power is the control that an entity has over its constituency. So if they lose power by giving too much freedom, then that eliminates their ability to control, right? They're losing that power because they want to provide a certain freedom to their people. So that is going to be a little bit difficult to manage, which is what has happened throughout history, where either tyrants take away too much freedom from the people and they revolt, and they usually try to overthrow the government, or you have countries where they try to give too much freedom and then the citizens have no respect or loyalty to that power because they see it as something that has no control over them, right? So they lose that power, they lose that relationship. So in order to establish and maintain a relationship, what we want to focus on is that happy medium, right? How much power should a government express over its people, and how much freedom should it allow it in order to maintain the status quo, to maintain their ability to run a country, to run a company, to where the power dynamic isn't too large, so that the powers can keep the power, but the people still feel free to do what they need to do in order to live their lives happily. Right? This relationship is what it's asking about. What do you see, especially taking into consideration the text that we read, the text about a prisoner who has given up his freedom because of the choices that he made in life. The caged bird, who, in contrast to the prisoner, did not do anything wrong in order to be caged, but has a view of freedom from its cage, but has no option, has no ability to do anything to prevent its current situation. So these are dynamics that we want to refer back to when we're writing an answer to this question. What is the relationship between power and freedom? Okay, so if these particular things, if this explanation isn't sufficient, please let me know so I can explain it a different way. Hopefully that will be clearer to you. Now, two things I wanted to mention. Again, this is because of my reviewing of the work that has been submitted. I want to mention two things that I think might help you complete the work and would help me grade the work, right? The one thing is, I don't have an issue with students who prefer not to answer in full sentences, only if they're providing the exact question that they're answering. You can answer a question with just the simple answer, but if you're sending me just the answer, I don't know what you're answering. So what you're saying is wrong, right? I need to know what you're answering. I need to know what the full idea is, what the concept is that you're trying to convey, because otherwise you're just sending me a fragment of a sentence, which in no way would be an answer to a question, right? Either give me the question and then answer the question with a fragment of a sentence. That way, in context, I understand what you're saying. Or answer in a complete sentence that determines what the question was and why you're answering the way you're answering. Right? If I ask you, for instance, right, if we're going to say that John went to the store, and I say, who went to the store? And the only thing you answer is John, then John isn't an answer that I understand, so it's going to be wrong. But if you answer, John is who went to the store, then I know the context of the question, and I can say, okay, well, this student read the question, understood the question, and answered appropriately. Otherwise, you need to say, who went to the store? John. Now I have both things that allow me to understand what the question was, what the book is asking you to do, and your response to that question, right? It puts it in context. Without context, there is nothing to grade, right? So it will be counted as an incorrect answer if only one of those two things is provided. So make sure that either you include the question and the answer, or answer in a complete sentence that allows me to understand what the question was. Okay, that is very important. The second thing is, make sure that you're reading the instructions. Some of you have actually answered a lot more than what the question is asking, which obviously isn't bad, but it's giving you more work. Not that I'm trying to suggest that you do less work. I want you to do no less than what is sufficient, what is asked of you. But I don't think it's necessary to minimally go above and beyond just because you're not understanding what I'm asking, right? So when you're answering the question, or when you're completing an assignment, make sure that you read the assignment and answer or complete what it is asking. For instance, in the concept vocabulary, many times when we were in class, I would ask you to write the vocabulary, write a definition and a sentence of the vocabulary, because it's something that we would discuss in class. Since we're not discussing these things in class, I just want you to answer the questions. If the question does ask you to write the definition, then please go ahead and write the definitions. However, there was one instance where the word study asked for 2 definitions of words that were related to the vocabulary that were included, and many students gave me definitions of all of the vocabulary, which were 6 words, which is fine. Obviously, you are going to get credit for that, and I appreciate the effort that you're putting forth in completing the work. However, it wasn't asked, so it's not something that you need to do. I just want to make sure that you are reading the instructions and doing what the instructions ask you to do. Now, you can do more work if you feel that it helps you understand the material. I appreciate that, and that's certainly not a problem. No one's going to criticize you for doing more work, as long as you make sure that the more work is done for your benefit. Okay? And the more work that you do in order to help you understand the material that we're going through, in order to understand the unit which you're going to be quizzed on, is great. Just make sure that you're doing what is asked at least. Right? So if it's asking for 2 definitions of particular words that are related to the vocabulary words, at least write those 2 definitions. If you would like to continue and write more definitions, no one is going to complain that that is something that you're doing. It is certainly going to be appreciated, and in the long run, it will help many of you to understand the relationship that those words have with each other. Right? A lot of times word study does that. It does ask you to write definitions for words that are related. So go ahead and make sure that you can either write, one suggestion would be to write what is in the assignment description. I'm always going to give you specific details in the description if there are any limitations. Like, for instance, sometimes I will ask you to just read a page and not answer the questions that are attached to that page. So you can just answer the questions. You can just write the instructions that are on the assignment and include it in the text that you send me as which is your work that you're submitting for grade. So to recap, make sure that when you're answering a question like what is the relationship between power and freedom, please try to first define what you understand as power, what you understand as freedom. That way, when I read your answer, I understand if there is a particular nuance that you're including in your answer that is very specific to you because you have a slightly different view on what power or freedom is. Right? There are definitions that I would like you to understand in the context of what we're reading, that it is very important for you to be able to understand other works that we're going to read, other selections. But if what you're reading asks you for something specific, write a definition of these words, or at least within the answer, write a definition of the terms that are going to be used. That way we are going to be on the same page as to what you're answering. Okay, hopefully this will be able to help you answer some of these questions at least. And then in the work that you're submitting, please make sure that you include the complete context for your answers. Either write the question or write a full answer that includes the concept or the context that answers the question. All right, just don't simply answer a question, especially if it's a one-word answer, because then I don't understand what you're answering, and it's going to be counted as an incorrect answer. Okay, please include context. And then make sure that when you're answering these questions, when you're doing these assignments, that you're reading the instructions and completing the work minimally, at least include what is necessary to complete the assignment. And by no means would anybody be critical of you if you included any additional material that would help you understand what you're doing. If you want additional help in understanding and you include more information in order for me to review it to help you understand the material, then by all means, I will be more than happy to go through what you send me to make sure that you do understand the material and that you are understanding the work that I'm asking of you in the assignments. That is certainly not a problem. Like I said, I'll be more than happy to review it, to give you pointers, to answer the questions that you have. And like always, make sure that whatever doubts you have, you do come to me first so we can go through the answers, so we can go through the material, so we can make sure that I can at least provide an explanation of the doubts that you have to clarify them. In this way, will we best be able to understand the material in order to help you get good grades on the assessments. So, thank you for your attention if you've gotten this far in the video, which I hope all of you have. And I will see you in the next video.